I would like to discuss a series of artistic initiatives and activities that took place across Europe during the 1970s, and to reflect on the approach they adopted or claimed to adopt. This approach can be described as contextual, but as we will see, it has also been defined by other terms such as sociological, participatory, art in the social field, etc. These activities were carried out in different locations: Socialist Poland, Italy, West Germany, France. And even if these geographical and geopolitical differences seem in a first glance to prevent any comparison, I propose here to bring them together to maybe shed light on the organizers' shared concerns and operating modes, and also, of course, on their points of divergence. So the case I will present here, not in a very exhaustive way, I'm afraid, because there are three, so I will just try to synthesize them. So these cases have in common to deal with practices that not only insisted on their contextual character, which is in a way something maybe quite common. Art is generally related with its context. But they also built a proper theoretical or curatorial framework to explain and defend this idea of an art anchored in a determined reality. So this approach, this theoretical framework or curatorial framework, also tried to challenge the idea of an international or even a universal language of contemporary art that facilitated its incorporation into commercial and institutional circuits. And of course, as we will see, this attitude was not without contradictions and sometimes also inconsistencies. So these practices, the practices I will present this evening, were characterized by a singular combination or correlation. On the one hand, a desire to connect to a specific place and time, so a territory that could be physically occupied and experienced by the artists in the present. And on the other, they also had the ambition to share and discuss these processes with artists who were active in different contexts. So they did so in the framework of international encounters and exhibitions. So I'm particularly interested in this kind of back and forth or this like oscillating movement, the way these initiatives operated on different scales at the same time, and also the strategies of communication or self-presentation that were used to promote, themselves to a broader audience. I also suggest, and this is something I'm quite interested in, that they showed a particular sensitivity to the issue of cultural and territorial decentralization that was at that time discussed at a grassroots level, but also in certain public policies in different states across Europe. And I start with the first case. In July 1977, a group of artists and cultural operators met at the Remont Gallery in Warsaw to discuss the idea of art as an activity in the context of reality. As the director of the Remont Gallery, Henryk Gajewski, recalled in his introductory discourse, the aim of the international conference was to facilitate, and I quote him, the confrontation of attitudes and experiences in relation to art, artist, reality. End of quote. This questioning, Gajewski added, had been initiated by the Polish contextual movement, and it had already been addressed over the past years in meetings in Malmö, Sweden, Toronto, Canada, and Paris. And we can also add, and here you can see a small chronology of all these encounters and events that dealt with this idea of contextual art. There was also an exhibition in Lund, Sweden, and a seminar in a small city in Poland, Kazimierz on Vistula, which preceded the Warsaw Conference. So what motivated this heterogeneous group of persons from different origins and speaking different language to gather and discuss on something that claimed its Polish origins? These international gatherings were all inspired by the ideas of one of the organizers of the Warsaw Conference, Jan Świdziński, who was from a different generation in relation to the other participants. These ideas, Świdziński's ideas, were exposed in 2 small books in English language that had extensively circulated among the participants. And here you can see the second one, Art as Contextual Art, that was published by the Raymond Gallery in 1977. There was also another book previously published in Lund in 1976 that contained a sort of manifesto of Świdziński that was titled 12 Points on Contextual Art. So Świdziński departed from the observation to explain his kind of theory or doctrine of contextual art, that the meanings attributed to objects constantly changed, which implied that other meanings lost their validity with regard to reality. He consequently rejected an activity that would contribute to stabilize these meanings and defended instead an art based on the acknowledgement of this permanently changing meaning. So in other words, he defended an art more concerned by the relation between the meaning and the concrete reality in which it surged, than an art that would be concerned by a fixed object. Świdziński situated contextual art out of the sphere of aesthetics. And as you can see, he wrote, "Contextual art is a social practice that is not interested in theoretical generalizations. It is not concerned with the production of prepared objects for cultural consumption. It is a form of acting in reality through the following transformation of meanings." And then this combination from reality to another reality that is transformed by its relation to something that is contextual. With these views, Świdziński marked his distance from conceptual art, especially with this first manifestation as exposed by Joseph Kossut and his ideas on art's existence as an analytical proposal and a tautology. And he also distanced himself from the avant-gardist idea of art as a rupture, as a kind of unexpected eruption in a historical continuum. Quite interestingly, he also insisted on the singular roots of his theory, born in socialist Poland. So he described it also as a product of Marxist consciousness and also of the Polish school of logic, as well as the Slavonic structural traditions. At the same time, he recognized that due to the growing interest for these ideas, contextual art has been well accepted and understood by artists from other countries and continents, who identified with these statements, which resonated with their own practice and reality. So we could say that on this respect, Świdziński's writings on contextual art were, in a way, a program that he hoped would be embraced by as many artists as possible who did not fit into a contemporary art scene that was dominated by the capitalist system and also by Western capitals, Western artistic capitals. So the secondary of hidden agenda of Świdziński's contextual art, in fact, consisted in stimulating the creation of a sort of alternative that would reject the logics of centers and peripheries, the passive assimilation of models, and insist instead on the validity and relevance of action in a given context. This alternative came into being in Paris in one of the previous encounters on contextual art with the creation of a third front that brought together artists from Poland, Canada, France, the UK, and the Netherlands. So the Third Front Manifesto called for the development of a self-managed, socially based practice. It insisted on the interrogative role of cultural activity, and it also welcomed differences within its proper collective as an essential aspect, and also had a sort of program of action that was based on communication, self-organization, and also the setting of different activities. So from this point of view, Świdziński's ideas and theory were a sort of catalyst for the emergence of an alliance between artists from distinct geographies. For a very short time, because we are talking about really a 2 years period, they functioned as a cohesive element for a very heterogeneous group of people who had their own objectives, and it provided the impetus for this collective reflection on their particular condition and situation, both in relation to the art world and to their immediate social and cultural reality. So we could say that if we want, the theory maybe is less significant in itself than what it has achieved in terms of social mobilization within a specific socio-professional category, which was that of artists and cultural producers. It is also true, however, that the meetings and the conference around this idea of contextual arts not always produced consensus. A few participants, especially in Toronto, mocked the backwardness of Świdziński's ideas, in particular in relation to his critique to conceptual art, which in a way happened a bit late, because in 1975, Józef Kossuth had already also revised his ideas on conceptual art with the book The Artist as Anthropologist. So he also, in a way, had a reflection on the context. So this was one of the critiques that were expressed. And other participants also deplored the exclusive theoretical character of these meetings and the absence of art as a practice, and the absence also of concrete artworks as outcomes of this theory. Świdziński answered that the aim of the meetings was not to present the artist's output to the public, but the problems. So he answered with his speculative, a kind of speculative approach. As the art historian Anna Markowska, who has written extensively on this topic, on the topic of contextualism, as she noted, it was not so much, in fact, a matter of producing artworks or plastic experiments than of sharing ideas and questions in the framework of local activities. It was more about, in other words, more about the journey than its point of arrival through art. And on this respect, the expression local activities may offer an interesting definition of what contextual art could be, if realized. While for Świdziński, local activities primarily included the already mentioned meetings, seminars, and conferences, this expression may also apply to artworks that were actually conceived in relation to specific environments. And these environments were, in the case of works I will talk about now, the art world, or also traditional or rural cultures. Among the circle of artists who were initially close to Świdziński was Anna Kutera from Wrocław. Along with two other artists, Romuald Kutera and Lech Mrożek, Anna Kutera had been actively involved in the art scene of her city, Wrocław. Her artistic work was based on photography, with a series of portraits that were regrouped under the title Morphology of the New Reality. In 1975, Kutera realized a performance at the Students' Festival F Arts in Gdańsk. which photographic and film recording would be included later in the exhibition Contextual Art in Lund. So the performance presentation consisted, and you maybe know it because it's a work from Anna Kutera, which is maybe the most known work of her. So presentation consisted in inviting members of the audience, all male, to sit next to her for a short moment without talking in front of the public. They could communicate in any other way, and there were no further instructions regarding what they had to do. So before starting, Kutera read a short statement, you can see here. I am happy to be together with a group who understands the meaning of being together in art and getting to know each other without words. The action had been subject to different analyses, which have in many cases stressed its gender aspect. Also, although this is obviously of importance, it can also be read as an artistic comment on a particular social and professional milieu, that of artists, and also a way for Kutera to signal her belonging to this milieu. Beyond the sensation of comradeship that can be perceived, her action also pointed out the kind of tacit, non-verbal mechanisms of recognition and self-recognition that operated in these events and often played a central role in the career of artists. From the point of view of contextual art, and if we use the language of Świdziński, we could say that Kutera's action addressed her own reality she was really involved in. She associated herself with this reality in a way that contributed to delineate it, to show it, if we want, in a performative way. The absence of women in this friendly confrontation with other artists somehow also anticipated another work of Kutera I would like to also talk about now. This work was created 2 years later as a contribution to another conference on contextual art, the one on Kazimierz on Vistula. It was, this conference was a preparatory conference to the Warsaw International Conference, which included only Polish participants. It was organized a few weeks before by the Galeria Arcus in Lublin and was accompanied by a publication. Since Kutera could not participate in person, she sent her contribution in the form of a text that was read by the participants and included in the conference's publication. Her proposal is important not only because it was a rare example of artistic production in a theoretically focused event, but also because it articulated a feminist critique that was informed by the artist's previous exchanges with other women artists. While in Toronto and in North America, for the first encounter that took place in Canada, Kutera has exchanged with several artists who were involved in feminist movements. Although she kept a critical vision of feminism in a capitalist society and not necessarily identified with it, these conversations also led her to pay more attention to gender imbalance in the art system. Her work, titled "Is the word women a noun or an adjective?" consisted of a comment based on fragments from the publication Women in Poland, a publication that was issued by the Polish Chief Statistical Office. This official publication provided statistical information on the evolution of women's social position in the country between 1960 and 1974, and argued that women were well represented in different artistic disciplines. And they cited artists, a few artists that were also already publicly recognized, like Alina Shapotnikov or Ludwika Nitschova, for example. In reaction, Kutera raised a series of questions that problematized the publication's conclusions and undermined its optimistic discourse about a supposedly egalitarian balance. So here you can see the questions she raised. She used statistical data that pointed at the significant decrease in female presence between the secondary schools of fine arts and their becoming member of the Association of Polish Artists and Designers, which was in a way, which marked professional recognition. And finally, she asked, how many of those women are creatively active? What were the reasons of international feminist tendencies in the arts? Could it be women themselves who aim at alienation? So Kutera's contribution to this conference in Kazimierz brought the issue of women's social role and professional recognition to the fore. Is the word women a noun or an adjective? Applied research methods close to contextualism and sociological arts to introduce and discuss the notion of gender equality in the cultural sphere. These questions were completely topical in the context in which Anna Kutera was evolving, because she was in fact the only woman to be directly associated with contextual art. And the fact that her own conditions and that of women artists were unknown to their peers may have motivated her also to address this issue and give it greater visibility. And the fact that it was conceived to be read out loud in her absence in an event protagonized by male artists, critics, and theoreticians is also certainly of significance. So now I will go to the other focus of interest of contextual art as a practice, which deals with local activities that were concerned with the rural areas and the question of villages and cities or metropolis relationship. So these interrogations had surged already when Anna Kutera and Jan Świdziński were in Toronto, and they also traveled to New York at that moment, and met with several artists based in New York. And actually their interest was much more about, they asked many questions, for example, about Native Americans and the way they were in reserves and so on. So this interrogation surged again 1 year later in the context of a collective project that was carried out in the Kurpi, a rural region situated northeast of Warsaw and known for its traditional way of life. In November 1977, Anna Kutera, Romuald Kutera, Jan Świdziński and Lech Mrozek realized the local action in the Kurpi. During what Anna Markowska has compared with a temporary retreat into the pastoral rural landscape, they lived with a family in a village and accompanied its members in their daily activities. The family, whose contact had been provided by the local museum, was known for its dedication to arts and craft production, and most particularly the making of musical instruments and furniture, part of which was sold to a state company. So the visiting artists wanted to examine the changes that had affected this family, confronted with the necessity to adapt its work to the growing process of industrialization and standardization of products that was implemented by the socialist state. And here you can just see a comment, posterior comment by Świdziński, who said that they were really interested by actions in small towns, often in the countryside, where authentic communities had still survived. So it's also interesting to see the kind of, of language and adjectives that were used, of course. But yeah, they really had this interest for this phase of transition, for this issue of maybe also rural exodus and all the transformation that were being brought by these industrialization processes. This event, so this episode, reveals the contradictions of the idea of contextual art also. How far could these artists, strangers to this particular village and its activities, claim to be operating in a reality to which they were familiar? And what forced consequences could their presence in the village have? So predictably, this last activity marked a rupture between Świdziński and his colleagues, and also the decline of activities around the idea of contextual art. So these questions raised by this kind of genuine interest in a community in a rural environment resonate actually with the second case now I will address. And we will change geographical focus. In June 1975, sorry, the village of Neuenkirchen, with a population of 1,800 inhabitants, hosted an artist symposium. It was a village in West Germany, located between Hamburg and Hanover. The initiative came from the Franco-German Office for Youth in collaboration with the gallerist Ruth Falasik, who had been running since 1966 a project devoted to landscape art and in situ practice. The symposium, called Photo, Film, Video, brought together some 30 French and German artists over a 3-week period. More than a conference, the event was a sort of artist residency or camp, during which artists had to interact with the village, its inhabitants, and its natural environment. Human and natural, actually. The use of new media, film, photo, video, had to be central in establishing this communication, and communication was actually the main objective of this experience. The results were exhibited in the village at the Falasik Gallery, and a few months later in a Parisian institution, the Arc 2, or Arc 2, which was it became the Museum of Modern Art of the city of Paris later. The village thus became a place for experimenting with a provoked social relationship. So we could say it was not that different from this quirky local activity. And its also horizontal nature was questionable from the beginning. Several artists based their work in Neuenkirchen on direct interaction with the residents. They invited them to take part in actions or to exchange ideas with them. So among them, there was, for example, a pair of artists, Gerhard Buttenbender and Siegfried Neuenhausen, who planned to work on the attitude of local residents towards art and artists. And to do so, they wanted to study to what extent this population felt involved. So they gathered information on 3 different subjects. The first was what the local population produced as art and crafts. The second was what they valued and bought as art for themselves and their homes. And finally, the third was what they considered to be a typical artist. So they planned to present this project with a kind of dispositif, a structure with 3 registers that would include photo documentation, interviews, objects, and so on. The project eventually was not realized because one of them suffered an accident, one of the artists. Another artist, Eva Magdalinsky, developed a similar reflection on what the inhabitants of Neuenkirchen decided to hang on their wall and why. So this is the image on the left. So she asked what was their relationship with this object, which family member had chosen it, whether the presence of an art gallery had had an impact on this choice, etc. So she had on the one hand this kind of ethnographical look, and on the other she also documented photographically her own presence and the inscription of her shadow in this territory, as you can see on the right. Other sociological interventions included troc art, exchange by Tomek Kawiak, surveys of the population on the meaning of art by Lea Lublin, and other social interactions by the members of the collectif d'art sociologique, who actually also participated in many of the encounters on contextual art. The artist Nili Alter dealt directly also with the gender division of roles in work. So here you can see she documented the work of women in a dairy factory. And she also met the cleaning lady who worked for the gallery owner and documented her activity as a typically feminine job in a domestic and private interior. On the other hand, she also photographed the organization of the annual festival of the village, which started with a day during which the men were supposed to demonstrate their shooting skills. Another artist, Ernest Pignon-Ernest, pointed out that the impeccable, clean, and this term was in uppercase, the clean atmosphere of Neuenkirchen contrasted with the news in the press about, for example, the situation of people who were banned from employment in West Germany for political reasons, because they were communists or were suspected to be communists. So he kind of pointed at this sort of disjunction between the very calm atmosphere and quiet of the village and what was going on politically at the same moment in Germany. So all the artworks inevitably oscillated between this sociological and documentary approach and the artist's more subjective and personal experiences. The use of new media contributed to maintain a distance between the group of artist researchers or ethnographers and the object of their study. The fact that almost all the artists were foreigner to Neuenkirchen reinforced this feeling. And one of the few artists who was from the village or who lived near from it was the artist Hawoli, who in his work focused on the territorial and administrative reforms that were carried out at that time in West Germany. So these reforms involved a territorial and the kind of redistribution of government bodies. So he made a sort of inquiry in which he asked residents which institutions they considered more important to their village. So they had to make a sort of list, numbered list of what they found more important. And using the answers the people provided, he created a new image of the village in which all the elements mentioned were placed in order of importance. So the most important place for most of the persons that were interrogated was the communal or the local center, then the fire station, then the school, and so on. He also pointed out that some residents refused to give a classification because they considered that everything had to be there because all these institutions were actually what composed the community. So there couldn't be this hierarchy. At the end of the year, these actions were exhibited in Paris under the title A Socio-Ecological Experience, Photo, Video, Film, Neuenkirchen, 75. So in the exhibition catalogue, Neuenkirchen was described as a place of confrontation. The conservator or curator, Suzanne Paget, recalled that the aim was to let the artists confront themselves with the village and create an art village communication. She also celebrated the experience that had shown, according to her, in a concrete and not only theoretical or idealistic way, the true functioning through a lived experience of the relations art-society-art, and this with a public that was not familiar with contemporary research. And she also observed this that she made a sort of relation between the works that were deeply involved in a local tissue or context, and the way they recall in a way this sort of universal experience. Some comments in the specialized press, however, expressed their doubts about the actual confrontation with the public that had no knowledge of art. They described interventions that turned to be anecdotal, which applied their author's usual methodology and did not take the specificity of Neuenkirchen as the basis for the work. And there was also a journalist who considered that seen from Paris, it is almost as if nothing happened, and that the experience was mostly significant for the trajectory of the artist, but not really for the place where it happened. So the case of Neuenkirchen shows that the call for a confrontation that was supposed to be beneficial to both parties quite ignored the power balance that was established in this transition. The multiplication of these initiatives that paid attention to localities, particularly to rural ones that were undergoing transformation and reconversion, should also be read in the light of these territorial reforms that were taking place in the name of decentralization. So there is a sort of correlation, I think, between these projects and this territorial transformation. And this connects us with the last case I will present here. Arcevia was the name of a village in central eastern Italy. We are moving now to Italy. A fraction of which had remained almost depopulated because of the rural exodus. So in 1972, an entrepreneur native from this village, Italo Bartoletti, asked an architect, Ico Parisi, to plan a new urban plan to revivify Arcevia and attract a new population. Parisi proposed to turn this idea into an existential community in collaboration with artists from different disciplines. His idea was to implement a way of life, and I quote him, is isolated from the noise and pressures of the system, as self-sufficient as possible, and based on the reorganization of agricultural, craft, and residential resources. So his plan for Arcevia included infrastructures for the permanent population and also for temporary visitors. Because the plan was to have rural activities oriented towards rural tourism and also spiritual activities. So there was a project for a secular retreat, an ecumenical church, a public square, craft workshops and centers, etc. In Parisi's words, and here, this is the way he described this existential community. Existential community simply expresses a way of life closer to the deep needs of man in today's world. Hence, it's not a simple escape from reality, nor a model determined by rigid pre-established schemes. In fact, it must be the inhabitants themselves who discover this new dimension of life. So this was an important point. Consequently, the essential criterion of settlement must point in the direction of developing sociality. So this was really a project that was thought in relation to to generate a new kind of sociality, of social relations. Existential was not therapeutic, Parisi insisted, as the second, according to him, implied an intervention from above. So here again, the idea was to de-hierarchize this relation among the inhabitants, the participants, etc. Bartoletti and Parisi set a technical commission to work on the project, composed by different art critics, including Enrico Crispolti and Pierre Restani. And then this technical commission invited several aesthetic operators, that was the term that was used at that time, to propose projects that would take into account the integration of their proposal in the context of Arcevia. So here you can see the list of artists who participated. There were visual artists, filmmakers, architects, musicians, composers, etc. Operazione Arcevia was structured around three programmatic threads, we could say: the social, the urban, and the cultural, that were intended to be developed in parallel. So I cannot really go into all of them, but I will just address the cultural thread, which aimed to establish, and this is a quote from Parisi again, a visual dialogue that forces the viewer to consider the architecture, the image, the environment as an interactive element. So this thread was dominated by two principles. On the one hand, the integration of the arts and the collectivization of the work of art. So these two principles. So any kind of abusive monumentality resulting from the imprint of an artist that would be too, let's say, all-powerful was proscribed, actually. On the other, the collaborators should avoid also falling into purely decorative interventions. So there was really a kind of strict program. The creative solutions should also include enough flexibility to ensure that future residents have a greater say in the design of their living space. Here you can see the map with the names of the artists and the different places where they should intervene. So they selected different structures. And also you can see the map that was drawn by Parisi with all this territory of the village. So among the proposals, for example, the kinetic sculptor Soto thought his proposal in connection to landscape, and he carried out a photographic survey to document the chromatic variations of landscape. His project focused on the facades of the houses, which colors should change according to the season, the weather conditions, and the orientation of the houses. And he also wanted to add some rotating elements. Another project was Francesco Somaini, who proposed a more maybe enigmatic and poetic proposal. So the title of this proposal was Anthropo Ammonite, like a fossil, and it was a sculpture that seemingly that looked close to a human fossil, which was supposed to be a mobile artifact that would roll away from the city and leave traces at the same time, so in a way that would leave a sort of a bas-relief, a memory, a bodily imprint, in the words of the artists. And there were also other projects like the one by the musicians Francesco Penisi and Vittorio Consoli, who designed a staircase that was supposed to make music when it was used. So it was built on a specific musical system. And Penisi, interestingly, made also a distinction between raw sound and organized sound, and he also evoked the specific sonority of Arcevia. So he had, interesting consideration about this idea of raw sounds that are maybe quite a rare example of reflection on a sound identity of a place. So, of course, here again, and I'm already arriving to my conclusion, one of the challenges of Operazione Arcevia, and also one of its paradoxes, resided precisely in this attempt to balance collective and individual aspirations, especially the artists' aspiration to experiment and free their creativity, and on the other side, the social program that underpinned the whole project. So all these topics were discussed at a general meeting on site in July 1975. The discussions encompassed many topics, including the role of craft and agriculture in the shaping of the community, the transformative potential of art versus active politics, and also the differences between the model of the modern village and a more traditional model based on agriculture. There were also some warnings, obviously, about the risk of cultural colonization realized by the artists in their actions and proposals for the village. So these were some of the discussions that were at stake during this project. In parallel with this process of creation, the members of the technical commission carefully orchestrated also a campaign that publicized Operazione Arcevia in the media and also among a targeted public. They prepared bulletins of information. They also initially planned to document all the process with a movie or a documentary film. And Ecoparisi also took many photos of the process. All these materials were actually presented in the context of the Venice Biennial in 1976, part of which was dedicated to the idea of the relation between art and social practices. So, as we can see, there was also this interest for reprojecting this project also on the sphere of contemporary art and of arts institution. So I will now conclude. So we can say that the project of Operazione Arcevia is different from the ones that were previously presented in that it dealt with a space that was almost emptied from its population, actually. At the same time, it is also underpinned by the desire to have an impact on a determined community and to reflect on the role of art in this transforming landscape. So all the projects, activities, proposals that I have presented now were also characterized by this kind of back and forth movement I mentioned in introduction between this very focused and precise attention to a local context or a regional context on the other hand, and on the other hand the will to reproject these activities on an international scene. So we could also say that there was actually a space that was left empty, in this movement, and it was the space of the national, of the idea of the national that was in change, still structuring the art world, thinking about artist participation to international exhibitions and so on. So this is these empty spaces that artists were related with these contextual experiments and practices. It was this empty space that these artists invested and tried in a way to fill with their transformative projects. Thank you.